Today we will be discussing the laws of making brachas, of Hashem's name, and responding to brachas. And we'll go through the points as we go along. But let's take a look at where we've come from. That will give us an idea of where we're going. So the book, the Holy Sefer Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, goes in the order of the day. It follows the order of the original Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, beginning with waking up, washing our hands, getting dressed, using the washroom, having a clean environment to be able to learn or daven. And then we reach section number 6, which is the section that deals with making brachas and the honor due to Hashem's name. And you can pick up any of the classes of the previous sections on our website or by looking inside the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. And now on to section 6. So yesterday we began by reading the section inside, and we spoke about the importance of giving a bracha the respect that it deserves. And these are the points that we mentioned yesterday, most of which we mentioned yesterday. Firstly, we said that from when you begin to make the bracha, you should already bear in mind which blessing you're about to make, rather than thinking about that at a later point, because the holiest part of the bracha is the third word, which is Hashem. And we explained yesterday that whenever we make a bracha means to draw down Hashem into this world. So when we say Baruch Atah Hashem, we're bringing down a specific godly entity into the world according to the subject. And so therefore, before we start, we should bear in mind which bracha we are making. We spoke about not being preoccupied, in other words, to focus on the bracha and stop whatever else we're doing at the moment that we make it. We spoke about slowing down and thinking about the meaning of the blessing that we're making. You know, often when I'm learning with people, they speak about how, thank God, I'm managing to daven a little faster. And I'm always telling people that actually the goal is to be able to daven a little slower and a little bit slower so that you have an opportunity to think about the meaning of the words that you are saying. We said that a good suggestion in order to help you concentrate on the bracha, the blessing you're about to make, is to actually say it aloud, where you can hear yourself saying the words, because when you say it in a whisper, then it could go by too quickly. Before you get a chance to even realize you're making the bracha, you're really not sure if you made it, as opposed to if you say it loud enough that you and those immediately around you can hear, that immediately will automatically evoke a level of added concentration and focus. And this is certainly something that I've been trying to train myself to do around my children, because however I make the bracha, they do it exactly the same way. So at least I want to set them right, for their sake, if not for my own. That's section number 1. And that brings us to where we are up to today, section number 2. This is a fairly simple point, which is when we make a bracha, we should make sure that our mouth is free of any food or saliva, meaning that it's clear, as the pasuk says, my mouth shall be full of your praises, meaning nothing else. So certainly we shouldn't be making a bracha with our mouth half full. That's pretty much about what to bear in mind when we make a bracha. Okay, the next is Hashem's name, and how that deserves the highest level of respect, and how we should make sure that it is not said in vain. Okay, let's read inside a little bit, as well as you could take a look either on the left-hand side where you can see the points that we are covering in easier point form, or to get a more thorough, follow along with me as I read it inside. So the Shulchan Aruch continues, it is forbidden to utter the name of Hashem in vain. Whoever does so violates a mitzvah, meaning one of the mitzvahs is to fear Hashem, and part of fearing Hashem is making sure that his name is never mentioned in vain. Okay. Indeed, the concept of fear is not mentioning his great name except in praise of him or when reciting a bracha whenever required. We'll speak about that soon, how we should never even say a bracha unnecessarily. Or when studying Torah, meaning if it's part of a verse. You should fear and tremble when you mention the name of Hashem. Blessed be He. but you should not utter it, God forbid, in vain. This not only implies the ineffable name, but includes all names that are ascribed to Hashem. Blessed be He. And it is not only forbidden in Hebrew, but it's also in any language. Okay, so any name of Hashem and any language. And then he continues with something that was common practice then and remains common practice today. And he says, he who curses his friend or himself in the name of Hashem actually would be deserving of corporal punishment in the times of the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so that's something that we really need to be careful not to say something like this. Hashem should punish this and this person using God's name. That is a complete violation. But even just in the habitual way that people often say, oh my, etc. That is really problematic because you're saying Hashem's name in vain. Maybe that's where the concept of, I've heard people saying, oh my gosh, maybe they kind of try to quickly catch themselves at the last minute so that they don't end up disrespecting God's name. So that's certainly something to bear in mind. Often you hear the mention of Hashem's name and it should be dealt with in the highest level of respect. Okay. Now, in addition to not saying Hashem's name in vain, we should also not even write Hashem's name in vain. So this is actually a little bit tricky because there's another concept that whenever we write a letter, we like to mention Hashem. That's why you'll often see on the top of the letter, it will say a BH or BSD, Baruch Hashem, or in Aramaic, B'siyata Dishmaya, blessed is Hashem, with the help of Hashem. So we just say, do a base hey, or we write hey stands for Hashem, or it's a reference to Hashem, but you shouldn't actually write blessed be God. Why? Because if you're writing a casual letter and it's going to end up in the garbage, then again, you've desecrated God's name, not by saying it, but by taking that actual name and disrespecting it. That's where the concept of Shemus comes into the picture. The idea of Shemus is that anything that has either God's wisdom, meaning words of Torah, words of prayer, or anything that has Hashem's name written on it may not be disposed of and instead needs to be buried with the highest level of respect. And one final little thing is, so a good way to refer to him is as Hashem. But by the way, it is acceptable to, when teaching Torah, for example, or when explaining an idea, to say that God commanded us the following. Because this isn't in vain. This is part of the study of Torah. But to just use it in a casual way without the reverence that it deserves, we should rather say Hashem. And that's why in general, we try to substitute God with Hashem so that he's given added reverence. Some people, they try to do a hybrid. They don't want to say Hashem's name, but they want to say something that sounds similar. So they say Ad Hashem. And the Kitzur says that's actually counterproductive because it sounds disrespectful. Rather, we should just use the term Hashem. So that's as far as Hashem's name with the highest respect and not in vain. Okay, what else is there? So aside from benching, when in doubt, goeth out, meaning that not only do we need to be careful about not saying Hashem's name in vain, but we should also be careful about not saying a bracha which has Hashem's name in it in vain either. Now, what's the difference? So in fact, saying a bracha, a blessing in vain, I think is even worse than just saying God's name in vain, because it's one thing to mention his name in vain. It's another thing to go through the whole bracha, which is supposed to be bringing godliness into the world, and for that to all be done incorrectly. So therefore, you must be careful never to recite a bracha in vain or cause yourself to say a bracha which is unnecessary. If you did say a bracha in vain, so what's the solution? So the second verse we say when we say the Shema, we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and then what do we say? We whisper Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto L'Olam Va'ed. There's a whole story behind that phrase. It was discovered when Moses was on the mountain. He heard it from the angels, according to some Torah sources. And what that verse means is that the name of Hashem should be respected and blessed forever. So that's kind of the way to rectify it. If we did say a blessing unnecessarily, so we just kind of didn't show the adequate respect to Hashem's name. So what we immediately do is we show how actually Hashem, I hold you with the highest level of respect. And by saying that verse, Baruch Shem Kvod Bachotol Olam Va'ed, that puts us, that kind of covers up for the mistake of saying a blessing unnecessarily. He gives some other solutions as well that are a little bit more tricky. Like if you just said Baruch Atah Hashem, then there's a verse in Psalms which that verse goes Baruch Atah Hashem Lamdeini Chokecha, so you can kind of catch yourself in the middle. But what's most relevant is to avoid saying a blessing unnecessarily or in vain, and to say Baruch Shem Kvod Bachotol Olam Va'ed if you did. Okay. Section number 5. So there's a concept that when a person passes away, any water that's open in the vicinity should be poured out. It has to do with spiritual negative energy, and that we don't want to drink that water. So what happens if a person makes a bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shehakol niyeh bidvaro, he's about to drink the cup of water, and then discovers that a person has passed away, at which point it's actually harmful to drink the water. So what should he do? He has this dilemma. On the one hand, he doesn't want to say Hashem's name in vain. If he doesn't drink the water, he just said, thank you, Hashem, so much for this cup of water that I'm about to drink. You're amazing. But then if he drinks the water, he may harm himself. So the Shulchan Aruch says, drink a little bit. That way, at least once you made all those introductions, you should carry through. You thanked Hashem for the water, drink it. But drink just a very little bit. And then we have Hashem's assurance that one who performs a mitzvah will not suffer adverse consequences. If we're involved in a mitzvah, we do things right, then Hashem will surely protect us. Okay. This reminds me of a story of a child that once really wanted to eat something, but his parents didn't want to give it to him. Maybe he wanted to have an apple. So he had a very simple solution. He said, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei peri ha'etz. Now, what are his parents going to do? If they don't give him the apple, then he's saying God's name in vain. So he got the apple. This story is mentioned in a Farbrengen by the Rebbe, and he says how similarly we should kind of daven and ask Hashem, I think the message is, for Mashiach in such a way that Hashem should kind of feel, wow, you've asked so nicely, it's time that I deliver. Okay, moving along. Okay, so now there's a concept of saying 100 blessings a day. Now that sounds like a really lot. In a moment, we'll see how to break up 100 blessings every single day. I mean, to see how you can add it to your diet. But let's first talk a moment, perhaps first outside, what this concept of these 100 blessings a day are. So he doesn't mention it inside, but there was an incident, I think it was with King David HaMelech, where a lot of his soldiers were falling in battle, and he realized that they're not in good spiritual shape, and he thought, what can he do to stop this epidemic? And so he instituted, if I remember correctly, that by us 100 times a day blessing Hashem, meaning bringing Hashem down into this world in 100 ways every day, if we do that, then that will protect us from negative things happening. There's also a verse in the Torah that alludes to this. So let's move on to the second one over here. And now, Israel, what does Hashem your God request of you but to fear him? Now in Hebrew, the verse is, Ma Hashem Elokecha sho'el be'imach ki im le'yira. What does God ask of you? Now the word what, ma, what does God ask of you, the rabbis say can also be a reference to the word me'ah, which means 100. And this is an allusion in the verse, meaning although it was instituted by the sages, they found the way that the verse alludes to it, and it's kind of saying, Hashem is asking you to make 100 brachos a day. That's the second reason for these brachos, or a second source for these brachos. And a third source is if you count the curses in the book of Deuteronomy. We just did the curses once last week's Torah portion, but it's doubled in Deuteronomy. There are 98 curses, followed by another 2 negative statements. And the antidote to all these curses is 100 brachos. If we say 100 brachos, then that protects us from all 98 plus curses. So it's a wonderful thing to be making lots of brachas. It protects us. It brings Hashem into our lives. The question is, how do we actually make 100 brachas a day? So let's take a look over here. So here's a count of 100 blessings. I'll kind of run through it somewhat quickly. I can send it to you afterwards if you'd like to print it out. So if you count how many blessings are in the Amidah, there are 19 blessings. So if you're praying 3 times a day, then that brings you to 57. You're doing pretty well already. Okay, the evening prayers in Ma'ariv. So the Ma'ariv, we don't just say the Amidah. We first say a section before that. We say the Shema and some additional blessings, an additional 5 blessings. So that brings us to 62. And then just before we go to sleep, there's a blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem HaMakpil. We say to Hashem, please allow me to sleep, a good night's sleep. You can see it in the Siddur, and that's a blessing as well. So now we are up to 63. Okay. When we wake up in the morning, there are 3 blessings that we spoke about already. We say Al Netilat Yadayim. We say Asher Yatzar, which is the blessing after coming from the bathroom. But the third blessing we haven't yet spoken about is thanking Hashem for giving our soul back to us. Is anybody keeping track? Where are we up to over here? 52, yeah. 53, 56. Okay. Then there are another 18 blessings in the morning when we thank Hashem for enabling us to open up our eyes, enabling us to sit up, enabling us to stand, enabling us to walk, enabling us to all the things that it goes through. 18 blessings. So now that takes us up another 18. We say 1 blessing on the talus, and many of the practice of making 2 blessings on the tefillin, although Chabad practice is just to make 1 blessing. It's a difference of depending on different communities. Then in the morning, Shacharit, when we say Baruch She'amar, that's a blessing. Yishtabach is a blessing. That opens and ends the songs of praise. And then again, before and after Shema is another 3. Okay, so if a person manages to kind of go through the Siddur on a daily basis, then you're already up to 92. And then you leave another 8 for every time you want to have a cup of water or any other time you need to use the bathroom. So on a regular day, you're pretty, if you keep to the 3 daily prayers and whatever else is in the Siddur for the daily service, then you're covered. On Shabbos, it becomes more tricky. Why? Because on Shabbos, the Amidah, instead of having 19 blessings, only has 7. Because we don't focus on our personal needs on Shabbos. So that's minus 36. There's no tefillin. That's a minus another 2. There's 1 less blessing in Ma'ariv. That's minus another 1. That's minus 39. And then, okay, usually we gave 8 blessings before and after food. We're going to substitute that with a lot more. So we're basically down about 40 blessings. So how do we make up those 40 blessings? So there's an extra prayer on Shabbos, Musaf. That's an extra 7. Kiddush is 2 blessings at night, 1 Kiddush in the day. Okay, we're supposed to have 3 meals on Shabbos. Each meal, we say 2 blessings before, Al Netilat Yadayim and Hamotzi. And when we bench, there's 4 blessings in benching. So that gives us 6 blessings. So if you were to have 3 meals, then that gives you 18 blessings. Okay? And then a few snacks here and there. And if you're still short, so you could pay attention when the Chazan repeats the Amidah. Each time you answer Amen to the Chazan's blessing. So as far as this is concerned, it could be counted as if you made the blessing yourself. Also, before and after the Haftorah, there's a whole lot of blessings. So I guess the take home from all of this is the importance of a bracha and to make brachas as best as we can. There's still more to be said, but please God, tomorrow we'll speak about how to respond to a bracha, how to answer Amen, and then we'll be moving on to the next section. And in the merit of all of us coming together and learning, Hashem should shower us with His brachas, with His blessings. Thank you for joining us.